the reason for heartburn, remember it's reflux, and food and liquids are going down into the stomach, but they're going up. And there's a reason for that. What's the reason? So it has to do with anatomy. In the human body, we have a diaphragm, and the diaphragm is a big muscle. It's a very long and wide muscle, and it separates the organs in the abdomen from the organs in the chest. Through that muscle, the esophagus, your esophagus, goes from the oral cavity, from the mouth, goes into the chest, and there's a hole. There's a hole in that diaphragm where the esophagus goes through and then becomes a stomach. So therefore, the food that we eat or the drinks that we drink will go from the mouth into the esophagus, and then will go through this hole in the diaphragm and into the stomach. The problem lies with that defect, that hole in the diaphragm. If the opening in the diaphragm is too big, we call that a hiatal hernia. How big the opening correlates with how bad your symptoms are. So in fact, the underlying cause of GERD or heartburn happens to be a hernia. So everyone who has heartburn and GERD, in essence, has a hiatal hernia. Don't be alarmed. It's not the end of the world. The opening in the diaphragm is typically about 1.5 centimeters. But what happens when you get to about 2 centimeters? You're gonna have some symptoms. What happens when you get to 2.5 centimeters? It's very simple. You're gonna have more symptoms. The bigger the size of the hernia, the more symptoms you're going to have. So when you have a teeny bitty small hernia, you're in the 1.5 to 2 centimeter range, you might be okay with medications. You might do fine. You might get it only when you're on vacation at Hawaii and you're overdoing it a little bit and you're not watching what you're eating. You might only get it when you're stressed. So you might be okay with medications because you got a small hernia. But I guarantee you, if you're in a 3 centimeter, 4 centimeter, 5 centimeter hernia size, you're gonna get symptoms every single day. Medications are not gonna work. Well, how do we fix it, doc? Historically, it was very complicated. The treatments today are not that aggressive. The treatments are very simple. They're minimally invasive and have really, really good outcomes. But you've got to do your homework and you've got to go to the right person to fix it. Every treatment has to involve fixing the hernia. And fixing the hernia sounds big, like, oh my goodness, I've got a hiatal hernia. It's really simple, it's easy. If you fix the hernia only, you're gonna get some improvement, but you're not gonna get great improvement. You're not gonna reach 95% success rate. So you have to add a treatment for fixing the valve, so you prevent acid from going back up into the esophagus. So there are 3 options. So the oldest one of those treatments is called a Nissen fundoplication. It was discovered by accident, like most things in medicine. He was saving a patient's life, and in doing so, he took the fundus of the stomach, which is a portion of the stomach just below the diaphragm, and he just wrapped it around the esophagus as a quick treatment, and the patient survived, and then the patient actually said his heartburn was gone. It's available, it's approved, it's recognized by all insurance companies, all doctors know about this procedure, and that procedure is somewhat aggressive. It is a big procedure. The problem with the Nissen fundoplication is long-term. Patients develop what's called dysphagia, difficulty swallowing. About 20% of patients will develop difficulty swallowing. It may not happen right away, but over time. So this is a procedure that I perform. A lot of hospitals perform, a lot of specialists perform this procedure, but just be careful and look at the side effects of this procedure. The procedure that I like and I prefer to do on my patients because it has the best outcomes, in my opinion, is once you fix the hiatal hernia, what I like to do is do what's called a TIF. And a TIF is a transoral incisionless fundoplication. It makes the most sense to me. It is the best tolerated, and you essentially enter the same way as you do endoscopy, and you create a valve using your own tissue. The difference, it is not a 360 degree, what we call a full wrap, it is a partial wrap. And you end up with about a 270 degree, what's called fundoplication. It's very natural, it's comfortable, so you will never end up with dysphagia. It is almost unheard of to get dysphagia from this procedure. The third procedure that is available, it is called the LINX procedure. I am not the right person to talk about it. I know exactly what is done. It's a metal device that is placed laparoscopically around the bottom of the esophagus. And this device is made up of a magnet and strings. And the idea is wonderful, that as you eat and the food goes down to the bottom of the esophagus, this device will open, allowing food to go in to the stomach. And once the food passes into the stomach, the device will close or tighten down so you avoid reflux. I have elected not to do this procedure because of the fact that you have to put a foreign body, which I'm not a big fan. I'm not in favor of doing that to one of my patients. And once you do that, patients can't have certain things like MRI. They have to carry an alert when I go to the airport and let them know that I have a device in my chest. And I think the data is not all there that for me to do this procedure. It's not something I want placing myself or my family member, so how can I have this done in one of my patients? So it's not something that, again, I'm not saying it's bad, it's good. I just decided that I don't want to do that procedure, but I really like the Nissen fundoplication and the transoral because they're natural, using your own tissue, and they both have very good results.